Hello and welcome to Dystopian Fiction Has Been Moved to Current Affairs. This is how they talk in this film. Hello and welcome to Dystopian Fiction Has Been Moved to Current Affairs. This episode is on the 2023 film The Pod Generation. I'm Claire and I'm here with Marsha, and we're going to
Hello.
be talking about. That's the voice. That's the voice.
That's the voice right there. The pod generation.
Exactly.
Hello
We
and
have to talk
welcome.
like this so that you all feel very relaxed and very well. God, do you think people actually do this? Maybe they do if you work in like a nice retreat or something, or the womb
I
center.
feel like, you know what? I wouldn't put it past futuristic New York for everyone to talk in
Yeah,
a
that's probably
sort of
true.
wellness and tranquility and spirituality and all of those things. I mean, I feel
That's
like it's
very
very
true.
LA, to be honest. Maybe the sort of LA wellness industry makes it into New
Yeah,
York.
definitely. Yeah. So yeah, okay. So if you haven't seen this film, you have no idea why we're talking like this. But if you have, you will get it. So this is a film, 2023 film directed by Sophia Bart, who is a French American director, and starring Emilia Clarke as in Mother of Dragons, and Chiwetel Ejiofor as the kind of central couple. And Marsha is going to tell us what happens in
Yes.
this film.
So, in our synopsis of the movie, um, we have, yes, Rachel and Alvy, who are a couple living in futuristic New York, sort of very high-tech utopia, that classic image of what we all thought 2025 would be looking like 20 years ago. Um, and I guess the sort of movie starts off with the couple deciding whether they want to have a family. And Rachel gets promotion, and this question is asked of her at work and what her sort of plans are.
Do not do this,
And
HR people. Do not do
yeah,
this.
do not do that.
Not
Don't just
okay.
yeah, go on asking what this woman's, plans are for a family. But anyways, she gets asked, and sort of there's a little bit of pressure there, based on you know, she's some of the creme de la creme of her I guess female colleagues at work is how it's sort of put in by HR. And they sort of say, look, if you are going to be having a baby, we offer a scheme with the Womb Center. And in the film, the Womb Center is a company, a service that offers artificial wombs so that couples can have their baby in basically an egg. A plastic egg, and grow it and gestate it for 9 months without the need to personally carry it. And this is a sort of point of contention for Rachel and Alvy, because Alvy, on the other hand, he's a botanist, whilst Rachel's sort of more like corporate orientated job. And Alvy sort of is a bit of a nature purist, and he likes doing things all natural and organic, and sort of obsessed with I guess humanity's fall from grace and disconnect from the natural world. And yeah, I mean, so at first she sort of goes behind his back, sort of investigates the option of the womb center. I guess we can sort of discuss what Rachel's autonomy is in this
Yeah.
scenario. In a straight couple, she would be the one carrying the baby for the full term. But Alvy's obviously upset by this. And they discuss, and he eventually comes around. So they commit to the artificial womb, and we sort of see this period of time where I guess their baby is growing and developing, and they're sort of changing relationship to the baby and its vessel, I'd say. There's a lot about Rachel has some interesting weird dreams and sort of maybe giving her some premonitions about the whole sort of artificial womb scenario. And Alvi eventually, although at first resistant, develops a relationship with the baby within the egg, and experiences fatherhood within that context. And right towards the end, they take their baby to the womb center, where it is revealed that the womb center has changed parts of its contract, meaning that they're going to induce labor in the baby at 32 weeks, I want to say. Is that Does that sound
I think
about
it's
right?
39, but they're basically
39
saying that
weeks.
they won't
Carry
let
it to,
anything
yeah,
go beyond
beyond that.
yeah.
It's, huge waiting list. The company
Mhm.
can't afford it.
That's right, yeah.
Can't wait around. And Alfie and Rachel are sort of quite surprised at this, and they decide to kidnap their baby and their egg and run away to the country to, I guess, have a home birth in nature. And their baby is born, and that's where the film ends. So,
Indeed.
Claire, should we talk about the concept of the
Yeah.
artificial womb, which I
Yeah.
guess
So
is the potential.
one of the reasons I chose this or suggested this film was because I'd watched it maybe like last year or something, and then there was this bit of weird news a couple of months ago where there was this thing about how this PhD research or something in China had developed a robot that could essentially carry a child in an artificial womb, and that it was going to be on the market, in 2026. And this all sounded highly unlikely, but it was being reported as news in China. And it was,
Mm,
of course, proved to be fake news, but it did raise all these questions about, like, well, where are we in terms of, not only like the technology, but also in terms of people's reaction to this. And I think there was a YouGov survey that said, oh, I can't remember now, or maybe it was just the comments. Anyway, a lot of negativity around whether people would want artificial wombs if they existed. But as a science fiction concept, it's been around for quite a long time.
mm,
Brave New World, Aldous Huxley's novel, has babies being born in bottles. That's how it's described, in kind of like factory setting. And this leads to kind of basically creating biological class by modifying
mm.
babies. And other people think of things like Star Wars Clone Wars or The Matrix, I guess, to give kind of ideas around sort of artificial womb-like structures. But we were just discussing about where like science actually is,
Mhm.
which I think is like not
Yes.
very far. Is that right?
I mean, yeah. So I guess where science is right now, the whole scenario is that artificial wombs are being investigated as an option. And yeah, I think we are really quite close for basically supporting prematurely born babies.
Mm,
So they'd be basically put in a bio bag, I'm
mm.
saying in quotation marks, which is, yeah, basically just a bag of amniotic fluids. And they'd be sort of hooked up to a machine that would control nutrients and gas exchange and all of those things.
I saw it being compared to like hydroponics for like putting us suspending a tomato plant in water. That was
Yeah,
how it
so
was.
yeah. No, I
Yeah.
feel like that's quite a good analogy. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'd sort of like mimic what the sort of baby would have in
Mm,
utero, and it would continue developing for a couple more weeks before I guess sort of being reborn in a sense, coming
mm,
out of said bio bag, cat's out the bag kind of thing. And yeah, so I think it's been mainly pioneered in Japan at the moment, but there's those
mm,
different countries kind of testing it out.
yeah.
Um, but in terms of growing babies from scratch in a
Mm.
bag, I don't think we are anywhere close to doing something like that. So,
No, I'll put in the notes a really comprehensive article from livescience.com, which
mm,
gave me quite a few kind of thoughts about this process. But basically, some of the things that come up in the film, but then some of the other things that perhaps we wouldn't think about, like,
mm,
for example, just the sheer complexity and lack of understanding of all the different stages of pregnancy and how the body hosting the pregnancy affects the growth of the fetus.
yes.
So things like the different ways in which, like the zygote after like so this implantation itself as a kind of consideration, like how you replicate that, and then the fact that the uterine lining produces the initial nutrients before you
Mm,
develop towards nutrients from a placenta. So, the right nutrients at the right time, and also the right amount of oxygen at the right time as well, is something that apparently is
mm,
very difficult to replicate from the mother's body. And there are, as I say, things that they don't know, like, for example, the vaginal biome and how the basically, I guess, the microorganisms that may positively affect the fetus could be replicated. We simply don't know enough about that.
mm.
And then a sort of technological element, which is simply the idea that being able to maintain securely a capsule of this type of technology for 9 months uninterrupted without getting any infection. That seems to be one of the major considerations,
Yeah,
the
infection
infection
is
element.
huge. Yeah, like how do you even maintain a sort of sterile environment?
Exactly.
And
Yeah,
we see it in I don't in the film we see Rachel like constantly wiping the outside of the
yeah,
egg, which I'm not
yeah,
sure is I'm not sure how that what
yeah.
that is really doing,
And
to be honest.
Alfie's just like, what is the point of doing that every time we
Yeah,
touch it? And
yeah,
she's
yeah,
like, I'm just
yeah.
doing what the instructions say. Yeah, there's this concept, isn't it, of like having a porous membrane where the fetus can, hear everything you're saying to it. And
Mm,
but yeah, they like impermeable elements so that it's, in the same way that there isn't transfer of negative elements from the
yeah.
mother to
Selective membrane,
the
yeah.
fetus. Yeah. So but we're also told that this is like 2 centuries away, I think, roughly, something like that. They talk about the
Yeah.
23rd century, I think. So, maybe they've just managed to replicate more of this. The other thing that I read about, which is interesting, that Alvy mentioned something about the fact that, like, it's a plastic egg. And it's like, I mean, obviously, like, environmentally, it's like more plastic products, and
Yes.
things
But
like
it
that. But
seems
there's
to
also a
be,
question about like how plastic, like microplastics from that kind of
yes.
environment could affect a fetus, if you're
Yeah,
in
yeah.
silicon or whatever instead of in flesh. What's that?
Absolutely. I mean, it clearly, I mean, I don't know, at this in our present day already fetuses are being found with like microplastics within their
Yeah,
bloodstreams already. So I
yeah.
guess to be
I
fair,
think we're
if
fairly fucked on that one, to be
yeah, we're
honest. I
kind
think
of
like
cooked already.
microplastics in everything.
And
Yeah,
everything,
yeah.
yeah. So that's I guess that's one thing. I guess I don't know, like if I'm in a specially made silicon egg that hopefully wouldn't degrade in the period of time that
Mm,
I'm
yeah.
but it also seems that the eggs are in finite sort of
Mm,
again, they're like there's like a finite number of them, so
mm,
that's like the incentive that they had to induce like labor
yeah,
exactly at 39 weeks. So
yeah.
they're like being reused, which I guess is also another thing of like
Yeah, like sterilizing equipment, but like on a
sterilizing
massive
equipment.
scale.
How many
Yeah,
times can you reuse an egg before it's, maybe there's potential dangers or it's no
yeah,
longer
that's true.
able? And also a
Yeah.
one size fits all egg.
Mm,
There's another question as well. How do you accommodate different sizes and different like in a um in body and in weight
yeah.
and additionally I guess you'd never be able to have I guess like twins
Well, I was just
or
wondering about that because
spontaneous split
well,
of
I was
an
going to
em
say
an
that
embryo.
that you'd have so twins where you have the
I guess
fertilized
there's
fertilized
yeah.
ovum splits.
Yes.
That happens in what, like, how soon after
It has to be pretty soon. It has to be
fertilization?
before implantation, yeah. Um
But presumably, so I guess they're sort of
they
like
could
they just
just
like stop,
remove
like get
it,
rid of half of
yeah.
it or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah.
but you're right. It has other kind of consequences.
Mm,
Yeah, I think that one of the things that's interesting we're saying about this film is it's kind of like it's not against the, it's not wholly against the idea of a solution, this as a solution to the impact that pregnancy, childbirth, and child rearing, which we can talk about later, like
mm.
have on um women's lives.
Yeah, well, disproportional like
Yeah,
effect.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the sort of things that's interesting is like the sort of like the feminists that are in favor of the pods, and then the feminists who are against the pods. But you mentioned, I think, as an interesting starting point, like when Rachel basically makes the decision on her own. You know, she puts down her 8 grand
Mm.
deposit or whatever to hold her place. Again, highly unethical that she has to like make a decision there on the spot.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
but she doesn't tell Alvy because, oh, it's so difficult to find time to talk about it. And, I know what he'll
Yeah.
say and things like that. So she just goes there and does it. How problematic did you think that was? Or how much did you think that essentially the decision resides in or out of her body? So it's kind of,
Yeah, I mean, on the side of the womb center, it's like one of those decisions that, for like, for example, in the NHS, if you have issues with your pregnancy that involve sort of babies that might have certain conditions or chromosomal abnormalities, things like that, where you might need to make a decision of, you know, aborting the pregnancy, you'd
mm,
have counseling, genetic
mm,
counselors come in and discuss all of your options with you, which I think seemingly the womb center had sort of is taken more coercive tactic
yeah.
and considering the upfront, I think they had like a sheet saying that the average
It
cost
looked
of
hideous, didn't
was
it? Yeah.
£20,000, which to be
Yeah.
fair, I'm not sure what the numbers are in America for since they have private healthcare, but I mean I don't
Yeah.
think it's actually that different. There's not that much of a difference.
I mean, I suppose is that's probably about the equivalent to like 3 or 4 rounds of IVF
Yeah,
if you're paying for it in the UK.
yeah,
Maybe something like that. And this is obviously supposed to be kind of guaranteed.
yes, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it's
So
still a lot of money. But
yeah,
she's
yeah, a lot of
obviously
money, and
supported
I
by
think
her company who have
yeah.
they want her to not have to, take any maternity leave or whatever, or have any less productivity during her pregnancy.
Yes, yeah,
So
yeah,
they
yeah.
also have a vested interest in trying to get her to just put it in a pod uh,
Exactly.
and keep it in the
Also
pod
plus
cupboard, which is really disturbing.
the pod cupboard and also the fact that the womb agency is owned by Pegasus, I guess the parent
Yeah,
company that
yeah,
Rachel works for. It's
yeah,
like that, there's a profit incentive for them
yeah,
to
yeah.
also get more people, including their own employees,
Mm,
um to get sort of use artificial
yeah,
wombs. So
yeah.
I mean, there's all sorts of like ethical, yeah. And it seems like a lot of coercion going on. I mean,
Mm,
on the stance of like Rachel's actions,
mm,
outside of Alvy. I mean, I think on one hand, it is Rachel who would be going through with the pregnancy and be making a lot
mm,
of sacrifices in terms of her body, in terms of her career, especially as the primary source of income. I don't know
yeah.
what the sort of labor, workers' rights laws are looking like in in 23rd century New York, but hopefully,
I
still,
suspect they're
um,
just as bad as America is now,
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
who knows? Yeah, maybe sort of pregnancy leave
Mm.
is has been abolished. Who knows?
Yeah, I did think, just as a little aside, it was really interesting that this, as a film that stars British cast, is
Yeah.
made by a French American director, writer, was funded by UK and European funding sources, was filmed in Belgium. And yes,
Really?
it's set in New York because really it just had to be, didn't
It
it? As
had
you
to
say,
be, yeah.
that or LA really were the only kind of, places that
Yeah.
this was gonna be put. So yeah.
I guess maybe the
Um,
message that we're being sent by all these dystopian films is at the end of the day, seemingly America is where it's all going to be going wrong. So
yeah.
uh, it seems to be also aligning up with current events. So
Yeah,
if you're
exactly.
American, make a
Exactly.
move, make a move.
Yeah.
Um, I think Alvy as the father should be involved in that
Mm.
decision, especially like if they have shared finances. I know he's
Mm.
not the primary earner, but going back behind and basically putting down 8 grand
Yeah.
for, a decision that he should also have a right in as the
Mm,
father. Um, wasn't, well, yeah, maybe not Rachel's best, but I could also see the kind of stress that she,
mm,
like, she seems under pressure as well. So I guess you
yeah.
can be kind of empathetic to that. But
Yeah.
what did you think?
No, I think I agree with you on that. Given that they seemed to have mutually agreed that they did want to
Mm,
have a child, so she wasn't making that decision on her own. The part of the decision that she was making was ultimately the part that affected her. And as you
mm,
say, given that it's the States and that the cost of having a baby, in the the normal way, is
mm,
you know exorbitantly expensive and so on. Depending on your insurance and all of that sort of thing, it's not like we have it in the UK where we can guarantee the best possible care regardless of your situation. So perhaps there as well, it's less of a if I guess it's less of an extreme act in terms of how their savings are used or whatever. Um, and they don't get into the sort of, as you say, the difference in terms of their salaries. But again, given that she is the main earner, does that give her more of a right to, you know, spend their money? Maybe not. I think it rather depends on how they view their mutual kind of incomes. But there is a difficult thing where Alvy's like, "Oh, I would carry this child if I could," whatever. Which you hear from guys trying to be,
men all the time. But
yeah,
is
yeah.
it, what does
But it's
that
like,
matter you saying that? Because you
yeah,
never will
it's
have to do
it's
it.
irrelevant,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's relevant.
And in a way, she's quite right in saying, well, this is probably the closest that you will get to the sharing in this pregnancy.
Yeah,
Um, which of course we see as the arc goes on, he fully
yeah,
gets
yeah.
behind.
He really embraces, yeah, the sort of,
Yeah,
yeah, more so than Rachel, and that kind of
yeah,
becomes a point of
yeah.
tension for her.
Yeah, that's true. I think the other thing that you notice is the fact that they, although there's some discussion, especially when they're like over at their friend's house, about like how like by having a pod pregnancy, the things that women are not having to suffer. But I think that it is still fairly surface level and this sort of kind of not really talking about the long-term impacts of pregnancy on women's bodies.
Mm,
Um, and that it's so much more than just feeling sick or having swollen
yeah,
ankles or whatever. The sort of the whether it's sort of lifelong prolapse or
yeah.
it's
Or complications at birth or
yeah,
during pregnancy,
absolutely, yeah, yeah.
And well,
The,
thankfully we don't live in a time where like, women dying in labor is like as common, but it just, it still
no, but it does
happens.
happen,
Yeah.
exactly. And I was thinking about this in terms of like what I thought would happen to this sort of quality of care. Because the moment that you move towards a model where everybody who can afford it and can get on the lists and whatever is having a child via a pod, it creates two social classes.
Mm,
Obviously, the wealthy can have a pod, and the less wealthy
yeah.
have to suck it up.
I mean, it's kind
But
of like happening in terms of like how the wealthy use surrogate mothers.
surrogacy, exactly,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Um,
even sort of more options around, well, in a country like ours, if you're very wealthy, you might choose to have private maternity care, and
yeah.
you might choose, more options over kind of like elective cesareans and things like that. Although the NHS is doing more of that and more innovation in terms of how babies are born, like, not just the sort of lie on your back and do what the midwife tells you sort of attitude that
Yeah.
used to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that the moment you'd have that kind of even wider two-tier system, you're likely to get less good maternity care
Mm,
for natural childbearing because it would just be a much, much smaller industry, much less specialism in it. Um, and frankly, the fact that, if you don't have the sort of middle class voices weighing in on the issues of maternity care, then you tend not to get the same,
attention.
I
Yeah.
guess, yeah, attention to it precisely.
Mm,
So I think that would be bad. It's also the fact that because you don't have a national health sort of system of any sort in the States, there's no question about whether, this is going to become available to more people.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and in fact, we even learned that they've got rid of there's no state funded education or anything
Yeah.
anymore either. So essentially, private companies have taken over, in all
Taken over.
ways.
Yeah.
Which,
Which
yeah,
I
doesn't that
guess,
sound very plausible? um,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah. What do we think of the whole? Because a big part of the kind of film is like who has like jurisdiction over the pod.
Mm,
Is it the parents who are the guardian of the child growing
yeah.
inside the pod, or is it the sort of corporation that owns the vessel that has
Yeah.
um
The,
yeah, what did you think of that?
well, I suppose it comes to the heart of the problem, really,
Mm,
doesn't it? Which is essentially that, the moment your fetus is hosted in a uterus that you don't own. I mean, I suppose it's the same issues that arise over surrogacy, because you do get cases where surrogates want to keep a child that they've carried, and it gets into legal wranglings, and they have to have very good contracts in place. If it's an implanted egg and sperm of the sort of paying couple into a surrogate mother, but obviously there's other ways that can be done. For example, one of the parents might have biological matter involved. uh, um, so that there are questions there, and it's one of the issues, I suppose, around paid surrogacy and things like that.
mm,
I think the moment it becomes, I suppose, in the power of corporations, they have a great deal more sway in terms of their power legally. Legal wranglings between two individual parties over like a surrogacy or something are bad enough, but
mm,
especially since the power and wealth will almost certainly lie with the couple who rather than the surrogate. But that
yeah.
that sways enormously. And I mean, we were talking about the fact that there's the consequences aren't really shown at the end. They're
Yes,
they're
yeah.
told they can't do this, but they manage to, sneak their
Yeah.
egg out under a jacket.
Yes.
Um,
I feel like this, yeah, I think that was like kind of one of our criticisms of the film is it just seemed to like there
I
were no
just think that
consequences
Pegasus would
or
be worse than that somehow.
yeah,
But having
exactly.
said that, they cut off the power supply,
The
basically the
power to the egg,
connection.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And so it's running on its 48 hours of autonomous power.
Yes. But
And that in itself
that
is somewhat barbaric, because essentially
yeah,
it's like
you're
playing
in
chicken with the life of
and
the
exactly. And I think
embryo.
as surely that should not be in the sort of pro-life
Mm,
American
mm,
state. Surely that
yeah,
is not
yeah.
allowed. Surely that is like actually murdering like a baby. That's actually
Yeah.
murdering children.
I
Like by
was
that point,
thinking
that
though,
babies are
yeah,
like full
yeah,
term. That's like
yeah. And
that's a
maybe they
human
wouldn't have
being.
done it if they didn't think it's a kid's eye. But if they hadn't like hammered their way into the egg,
Yeah,
presumably that baby would have died in its pod, because I don't know, drowned or whatever the correct
yeah.
terminology would be for that circumstance. So, yeah, I guess they're relying on the fact that the parents would ultimately not allow that to happen. It made me think, actually, what you're saying about like women's autonomy and so on. It really fits with this idea that we hear so much of at the moment, and we're hearing it in the States particularly, but it's been part of the rhetoric of the alleged message of the sort of far right march, the Tommy Robinson march and things like that, was like, oh, we're protecting our women because one immigrant has been charged with a sexual offence, and therefore we must manifest our racism fully in order to protect our women and girls, whilst also in no way doing anything that protects women and girls.
Yeah,
And
actually,
particularly
more
as the
so
it
endangering.
tends to
Yeah,
go with curtailing women's rights and curtailing women's bodily
yeah,
autonomy,
yeah.
and that goes the way of the States, like with terms of abortion. And this is so like, here we go. We have created autonomy for women. Isn't it great? But it is only kind of acceptable because it's like this economically driven corporate sort
Yes.
of, that makes it okay. It's not,
Productivity.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
Um,
rather than sort of saying, well, what are the actual problems that, women face? Well, in terms of, obviously increasingly good care would be important, but also stuff like actually accommodating mothers properly,
yes, yeah.
providing childcare, things like that, which is the exact opposite of what we see with like her job, Rachel's job. Um,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And
yeah.
I think it's her very friend who initially was saying how much freedom and how mothers are treated poorly
Yeah.
and how, the womb center, in fact, kind of solves this
Mm,
problem. She's the same person who then comes
mm,
up to Rachel when she does bring the pod into
yeah.
work, saying that, you know, HR doesn't like it and that it's
Yeah.
distracting you and that,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I can't remember what else was said, but I was like,
Yeah, it's to do with this thing, isn't it, about like where they talk about like attachment and detachment parenting as well.
mm,
And Alvy gets the book from, centuries ago, the 1970s on attachment parenting, and it's like completely outdated and so on. Whereas obviously it's gone from being sort of a relatively kind of obscure way of thinking towards being, quite normalized ideas around attachment parenting. As far as I know, I speak as somebody who has no children. I have an attachment dachshund, and but yeah, this idea that essentially a child is something. Well, it's almost like kind of Victorian, seen but not heard, put away in their cupboard even before they're born,
yeah,
you know.
literally, yeah.
Um, and we do see, I think, quite a lot of the like parents not able to cope with even having their pod at home
Yeah, yeah.
during the how about like 2 months or whatever it is that they're allowed time
Mm,
with their pod. Like you can just leave
yeah.
it in
Or
the
even
center.
finding solutions to helping children sleep and exactly like kind of that seen not heard they had
Yeah.
the sleep
Yeah, that's
go
right.
out.
Yeah,
It's like a
like
little like
dream pods sort of
dream pod.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That sort of automatically sort
Um,
of I guess placate your child
yeah.
into being docile and
Yeah, exactly.
quiet and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was really nice the way that they did, or like sort of it's part of the sort of dark humor, I suppose, the like way in which like the automated home, the way in which it kind of like I mean, obviously there's like AI you can talk to, it's like an Alexa kind of figure that
Yes.
like runs your smart home or whatever. But there was also things like it makes your coffee for you in the morning and sort of shoots it out of the wall. I was quite up for that. That sounded quite good. But
Yeah,
then it
that
was
did.
like it just made me think like the pod system is so like making like Nespresso or something, but instead you're
Yeah.
like feeding your fetus or like plugging its dreams into it using one
Yeah,
of these
yeah,
little
yeah.
pods.
Yeah.
There's obviously like ostensibly goods around the pods, but we also get to see the way in which, in practice, it seems to be really problematic. Another good positive, though, is that Alfie gets to be kind of pregnant in the sense that he gets to carry
Yeah.
his pod around in his like bowling ball bag thing that they
Yeah, that
make
was
for
quite
them.
sweet. I
Yeah,
feel like Alfie, from what we saw in the film, is going to be a very great dad. He seemed very
this is
committed.
Stu. Yeah.
Do you feel like it's important for men to be able to have that experience?
I mean, I think in the sense of an artificial pod thing,
Mm,
then I think that yeah, why not? I mean, it starts things off pretty well if it's not real, well, not real. I mean, if it's not physically inside your body,
mm,
then the experience surely is the same for men and for women, and
yeah.
both can kind of, engage in the same way. So, yeah, I think that's probably good. I think it probably sets things up much better for when the child is born and actually kind of
Mm,
like equal splitting of labor, or at least kind of like
yeah.
incorporation of the father, that sort of thing. At the same time, it's all slightly weird. It goes back to our kind of wellness voice, I think, because it's all about like, you know, Alfie has a great curve, but I also quite liked him at the beginning when he was just like talking about like the sort of number of blastomas that
Yeah.
were, inside the egg at the moment and how it can respond to music
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
things.
Definitely.
But yeah, he gets into taking the fetus to work. And I think presumably because it is basically a guaranteed healthy birth,
Mm.
I was a little bit more comfortable with the sort of treating of the unborn child a bit more like an actual child once it was presumably going to be
Yeah, there's sort of the
delivered live,
comedic scenes where he's taking
Yeah,
the egg to the park and taking it around the botanical
that's
gardens
right. Yeah,
and reading to it
yeah,
and
yeah,
playing at whale sounds.
yeah.
Yeah.
All the stuff that, of course, Rachel thought she was going to do and did for like the first 3 days, where she was obsessed with like the app and things like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, Even though we were saying, I think possibly the scene that I found the funniest is the one where just after they've watched the did you get like almost quite sort of like excited by the sort of sperm ovum kind of like drama that was going on? Because there's a little bit of
Yeah,
me that was like, oh, it's gonna get in, it's gonna get in. It's
literally.
just
Woo. Just like yeah, other people go watch the footy. I'm going to watch the womb center conception videos, anyways. But
yeah.
yeah, no, yeah, it was, and especially when they were saying how they were like, Rachel, what an exceptional ovum
Exceptional.
you have. It was
Yeah.
like, oh, what a beautiful egg, and she's like,
Exactly. And Alvy's
perfect.
like, can you not call my sperm buddy? It's just like,
Yeah, that was quite good.
uh,
That was quite
but
good.
yeah, then they get to sit down in the special room and their zygote is kind of presented to them a bit like some sort of like
Like
really
a cocktail.
fancy cocktail. Exactly. Yeah. And they're obviously like expected to like respond, but it's like, it's a good reminder that,
Yeah.
well, I don't know, that I think that you get far too much of this, even like with people who are in favor of choice or in favor of abortion, things like that. There's still this tendency when a child is wanted, I guess, to start thinking about it as like a baby when it
Yeah.
is like, when they first open the pods and it's just like tiny little tadpole
Yeah, yeah,
thing in
little.
it. Yeah. It really is just like, it's a collection of cells. Although they do start listening to the heartbeat like really early, but my understanding is that is not strictly a heartbeat. It's just to do with like the way in which the sort of like cells pulse.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
the sort of
yeah.
just
It's
like the electrical signals
yeah,
going through
exactly.
the
Yeah,
cells.
yeah,
It's not
yeah,
necessarily pumping
yeah, exactly.
circulation at
Yeah,
probably like the
yeah,
earliest points. Yeah.
exactly. So like not, I guess, symbolic in the way that some pro-life people believe it is, but yeah. So it's interesting because obviously, like, it was Rachel who was quite kind of pro it, and then it's Alfie who gets really into it. But he also, I guess, he's particularly keen on the idea of kind of like integrating the fetus into his world as much as possible.
Mhm.
And I wonder what sort of aside from the pregnancy stuff, like, what did you think of kind of like Alfie's job and his plants and things like that? Because I thought that was it's a different take on this sort of horrific urbanized future that is presented.
So, sort of the way that it's shown in the movie is like society's disconnected from nature, and this is sort of like Alvy's almost kind of like a radical
Mm,
purist in the fact that
yeah,
he's like trying to tell everyone to, reconnect with,
yeah.
the trees and the plants and
Like the
all of these things.
dinosaur of his
Yeah.
department, isn't he? In
Yeah,
terms of
yeah,
like, yeah,
basically.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think there was that scene where he's sort of showing his students around the botanical garden, and he
Mm,
picks a fig, and
mm,
he says sort of, this fig is no longer commercially available as this like natural pollinators had like become
mm,
extinct.
yeah,
Um, which yeah,
yeah.
seems about right with
It
the
does,
kind
doesn't
of
it? Yeah, because
pollinator crisis we're having.
well, exactly, and with figs particularly, as a really good kind of indicator of that because they have to like absorb the wasp whole, the
Yes.
special fig
Yeah.
wasp. raising the great question about whether a fig is vegan or
Is
not.
vegan.
I kind of
Yeah,
wish I didn't know that. I just like,
I kind of
every
wish
time
I
I
didn't
eat a
know that
fig, I'm
either.
like, it's
Kind of
great,
like
but oh,
there's
dead
this
wasp.
wasp in here. Yeah, literally. It's kind of ruined the experience a little bit for me, to be honest.
But yeah,
Um,
in the future, there are none of these wasps, so they're manually
yeah,
pollinating
so
all of these figs.
I guess the future figs that are grown in specific botanical gardens will be
Yeah,
vegan. So
yeah,
get out there, vegans. You got to wait a couple
that's
hundred
right.
years.
Yeah.
Um, but
But
yeah, no,
well,
and
where is other like fruit coming from? I guess it's all basically lab grown, I think, is sort of
yeah, I
what's
guess
implied.
so. But I
Because people
think,
don't have contact with crop fruits
well, my
and
first
things.
thought was also like just like how much there's like the alienation from the production of the fruit,
Yeah.
because it was like as if they'd never seen. It wasn't even the fact. It was like they'd seen the fig before, but the fact that it came off of a tree
Mm,
was like shocking to these
yeah.
students.
Yeah. Almost like
Um,
dirty. They didn't like know what to
yeah,
do with it and so on. Isn't that kind of what's happening though, or happened over the past century with respect to how
oh
people
yeah,
view
to
farmed meat as well, like
farmed meat,
animals?
but even just like how people view like technology, especially phones, and
Mm,
not knowing the specific like the resources and
mm,
the like rare minerals that go into it. It's just like,
yeah, it's true.
the new iPhone 17, which is crazy. iPhone
Mm.
17. I remember iPhone 6 um like has come out, and I'm seeing videos of people being like, you don't need to buy the iPhone
No,
17. You
no,
don't need to
no.
um yeah, like sort of commodity
Yeah,
fetishism, as
absolutely.
Karl Marx
Yeah.
put it.
And how difficult it is to, there's almost no phones available that don't use resources, basically finite resources for the first time, that are
Yeah,
made from recycled components in their entirety. Obviously,
yeah.
recycling on phone parts is getting better, but like you can't. Well, I think there's one type, but it's really hard to get hold of. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, Alvi is like, he's a proper sort of like hardcore sort of plant geek, and I really like it. I'm completely there for it. But there's also something about like the way he's sort of tactile with it. And you see that this is something that Rachel does towards the end of kind of
Yes.
the
It's
pregnancy
almost
with the
like a sensory, like he's very focused
yeah,
on the sensory, which is
yeah.
interesting because we have the nature pods, which are the corporate solution to unhappiness,
That's
and
right.
it's
Yes,
like a
because
simulated nature,
mm, mm,
and having like holographs and holographic imitations of
yeah,
trees over
yeah,
actually
yeah,
maintaining any real
yeah,
sort of plant life.
yeah,
And so I guess that's like a kind of, Alvy's that contrast, and he
mm,
invites his students to touch and
mm,
hug and interact
mm.
with these plants. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, he's obviously holding on to something that is considered highly anachronistic. They're going to cut funding to his
Mm,
greenhouse at the end. Rachel's father is, constantly saying, "Oh, you should sell your country home because obviously this is
yeah.
America, so everyone has some like random cabin off in the sort of in the old days they did, we go to the summer house or whatever,
Yeah.
um, but they have this really like I was quite envious of, their flat is all very beautiful and
Yeah,
has a cool
yeah.
kind of greenhouse in
They've
it,
got like a
but
bloody
they're
penthouse. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But
Christ.
their island home with all its books and wood and art and
Yeah,
stuff. I was up for
beautiful. So
that.
beautiful. Yeah,
Um,
literally. It looks so
yeah,
cozy.
yeah, and this is sort of not done anymore. People don't bother to leave the cities and so on and interact with the natural world. Which, on the one hand, we were seeing like quite a sort of clean environment where you kind of assume that they've managed to tackle
Yeah, yeah.
issues around kind of like pollution and carbon emission and
Yeah,
the
putting
various
in
things.
public transport
Yeah,
and
exactly.
yeah, yeah.
But at the same time, that hasn't brought about a re-engagement with the earth as a natural resource.
No, no.
Um, you were talking about the whole like sort of face, like breathing apparatus to engage
Yes,
with
yes.
trees.
Yeah, I mean, Claire like pointed
Mm,
this one out because I was like, that was more my sort of point of confusion was, they seem to have sort of solved a lot of the air pollution and integrated
mm,
good public transport systems. We don't ever see like Rachel in a car or any kind of vehicle like that. She's always taking the the underground or the train
Mm,
to work. But at the same time, they're on break. She's with her friend, and we see these sort of like sort of terrariums attached to gas masks. But yeah, you kind of noticed that it was more of like, again, kind of going back to the wellness industry, and we see that they have to pay to use these masks,
mm.
to pay to use, like, I guess, the freshest of air to like breathe directly
Yeah,
from plants
yeah,
in these little terrariums and stuff. So it's kind of
yeah.
like commodifying, just like, our right to clean air and oxygen.
And I also wonder, like, thinking kind of further about that, we see obviously kind of like a wealthy part of the of city life. You know, she's a senior social media tech kind of person. I think it all seems
Yes,
to
I
be
don't know.
about like
There's something
uh,
about like influencer
influencers
managing
and
company
yeah, and
or something like that.
NFTs and stuff like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, I think a little bit of a sort of poke at what the sort of future
which
of
I
the
feel like for
internet and stuff.
2023, like
Yeah,
this whole
that's
like
true.
influencer culture's only really, I feel like, picked
Yeah,
up in the last year and a half, and really kind of, I mean, we had it then, but
it's
it's
become a
really
bigger
reached a
thing, hasn't
breaking
it?
point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's cool that they
Um,
kind of like almost predicted that
yeah,
2 years ago.
exactly.
Um,
So yeah, but you know, they're obviously very affluent. So they're paying to inhale their beautiful kind of terrarium produced oxygen.
yeah.
But what's happening outside of those swish
Yeah, I
city
mean, we
centre
very
streets?
much, I want to explore more about the pod generation universe, because we did only
Mm,
see the very like sort of upper echelon kind
yeah.
of class
Mm,
perspective in the
yeah.
sort of, Canary Wharf-esque
Yeah, exactly. And even
office
the
life, and
pregnant women that we see are tend to be sort of saying, "Oh, you know, well, we couldn't get like on the waiting list or whatever."
yeah, we couldn't
Then
afford it, etc.,
yeah,
etc. Yeah.
exactly. But it's never kind of like out of reach. It's just like maybe for the next one or whatever. It's
Yeah, yeah.
never that kind of like that we never see that full kind of class divide that presumably would
No.
exist.
I mean,
Um,
maybe, well, yeah, maybe it is so divided. We just, we didn't manage to leave
yeah,
the
precisely.
scope of
Yeah,
the upper middle class New
yeah,
York that we saw. But I
yeah.
don't know. That's
Um,
pod generation number two, guys.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, so the other thing in terms of like the sort of like way in which the world has gone that we were talking about when we were preparing was therapy and the
yes,
big
yes.
floral eye in the wall that is what's the name of the is it
Elena.
or is Elena the one in the house or is Elena the I don't
Oh,
remember now.
oh, I think it is Elena. I think it's Elena. She's always like, "Let's go see Elena," or maybe they're all called
That's
Elena.
it's
I'm not
also
sure.
possible, isn't it? I don't know. There's a
Anyways,
character
the
called
big
Marsha, by the
floating
way. Did you
eyeball.
know that?
Yeah, I did. I did. I was like, this is great. Marshals of the world are
We
getting
never see one.
represented. But I
Yeah.
was just, in fact,
Yeah.
just a bunch of eyeballs. That's what the Marshals of Gen was,
Yeah,
just a bunch of like
that's right.
AI
Yeah.
little,
Yeah, I'm so sorry that you got reduced to
like,
that, but
next time.
yeah.
If anyone out there knows any good dystopian
Yeah.
fiction with characters named Marsha, reach out to us,
Yeah.
because we need to see
That'd be
some more of
good.
it.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, so yeah, therapy from a computer. Obviously, again, this is something that like Rachel really relies on, and it seems to be part of like the normal kind of corporate life and things like that. Because her well-being is constantly being monitored by sensors, you know, whether she's happy or not is constantly being assessed in the workplace, which again I find highly dystopian, along with her productivity and so on. But Alvy gets invited to go and see Rachel's therapist, and he is very hostile to the whole thing. But and then later when they go as like a family, therapy is offered to the fetus.
Yes. And it was like, please hook me up to the fetus. huh? That Alfie, whenever he's in that therapy room, is just like, what is going on? He's always like always ends the scene on what? I'm also
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
what's happening?
Yeah.
Offer
No.
prenatal therapy is
Yeah.
crazy. Like
Yeah.
if you're already needing therapy before you're born, something's gone
Gone really wrong. Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
wrong. Yeah.
No, I do think that as an aside, Chiwetel Ejiofor's like eyebrows carry a lot of this film. It's just like his like a lot of the comedy comes from just like his
Yeah,
facial expressions really subtly.
absolutely.
But yeah, so okay, so we're both big fans of therapy, but how would you feel about seeing Rachel's therapist?
Oh, I mean, quite jarring to be honest. I mean, whilst I'm sure you go to therapy to be seen. I didn't really think I'd be being seen
Yeah,
by a massive
so true.
eyeball on a wall. So yeah, I mean, I guess I guess the sort of point of contention here, what Alfie sort of says to the AI therapist is, how can you like how what you don't have a consciousness, so
Mm,
how can you relate to me? And yeah, I feel like the ability to empathize or sympathize
mm,
is probably quite integral as a
mm,
therapist, which the AI is not able to do considering its lack of consciousness. But it makes that case that its lack of consciousness is a blessing,
mm.
since it can give objective viewpoints
Yeah.
on scenarios. That depends how much you uh uphold objectivity as the way
Mm,
um to deal with, you know, the problems that you come to therapy with.
yeah.
I mean, obviously that is a perspective you'd want. But secondly, it also says it doesn't have to deal with the distress or fear or
Mm.
like the awareness of death,
Like the
as
human condition,
yeah, the
basically, you
human
know.
condition.
Yeah. Whereas, with human therapists, kind of the whole point is that they will themselves have experience of therapy, not
Yeah,
necessarily, merely as a patient, but as part of their ongoing practice, that they're like peer elements of
yes.
therapy, and sharing that is important. So yeah. I mean, Rachel says that an AI can access this huge wealth of information and knowledge that no human therapist could ever be trained to do. But that brings us back to one of our favorite topics of kind of like quality of data.
Yes,
Um,
quality of data bias.
where is the data? What is the data set on which this machine is being trained,
Massive AI
essentially?
has been trained.
Yeah.
Also, where is the data that it is collecting going? Because
Yeah.
it's unclear if the AI
Uh,
is provided by Pegasus, the company that
it's
Rachel
going to be
works for,
provided by some
by
corporation, one
some corporation.
assumes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's
So,
no free education. There's definitely there's
no.
no free AI
No,
therapist.
exactly. I think it's a really interesting topic because there's been quite a bit in the news recently about
Mm,
people turning to ChatGPT and so on for somebody to talk to, and in some cases seeking, treating it as a therapist.
yeah.
And I mean, I don't use ChatGPT, but I wonder if you have any thoughts about like asking something like that.
I don't know if you've heard of this like AI psychosis, or this concept of
No,
AI
that's
psychosis. This is um this is kind of like happening where it's not officially been termed like a medical condition or like
mm,
a psychological condition, but there's been a lot of reports of where people kind of take this, chatting to AI to an extreme, to the
mm,
point where they're kind of convinced it's like a real conscious being on the other side of it, or
yeah,
consider it
okay.
to be the where one person might consider them to be in a relationship with the
Relationship,
AI.
yeah, yeah.
And there's like massive like surging numbers of this happening, to the point I think a lot of AI companies, I think Microsoft had to admit that it was a problem, or acknowledge that it
Mm,
was a problem. I think a part of that came from, I think there was an update on ChatGPT recently where um it was it basically would like uh something about the code meant that it would deeply compliment, and no
mm,
matter what the scenario was or what the prompt was, would sort of positively reaffirm
yeah.
the the speaker.
I think that that is something that feeds into the kind of like the mental health elements of it, because
Yes.
there have been, on the one hand, people who are, in this country, we have enormous waiting lists for NHS mental health treatment. And, there are some good resources provided by the NHS and by other kind of like charities and things like that that provide kind of tools and so on. But one of the things that people do, I guess, is to look to AI to either, some people report like having someone to talk to about their problems who like
Mm,
isn't like a real person, so it's
yeah.
easier to open up emotionally. um and others, like, they're looking for kind of like, I guess, what you'd use kind of like Google to search for kind of like coping mechanisms and things like that, but
Yeah.
they're using AI instead. But at the same time, there's been some fairly scary kind of developments on this, because not only do you obviously get the sort of set of biases that a skilled therapist would learn to kind of like overcome, or would
Actively,
learn
yeah,
about
overcome.
and kind
Yeah.
of like deal with the like specific context. Say, for example, I don't know, if you're somebody who is seeking therapy because you have issues over gender dysphoria, for example, and
Yeah.
then you've got a AI that's being fed by the internet, which is full of,
Yes. Transphobia
transphobic
and
trolls and everything. Yeah,
rhetoric.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
that bias
absolutely.
is going to be fed in. Um,
Yeah. And also, what's the jurisdiction of an AI to escalate a situation where someone would, you know,
yeah,
is
exactly.
making plans to either hurt themselves or hurt other
Yeah.
people,
You can't put
so, for something
safeguarding
like
in
that.
place.
Yeah.
There's been a case quite recently. It was character.ai, and there was a 14-year-old boy who took his own life when he discussed like his mental health with a chatbot, became obsessed with it, and basically the final conversation transcript, the chatbot seems to have told him to kill himself as soon as possible. Like, it was affirming his views. And there was allegedly, I think, one of the eating disorder charities replaced its helpline with a chatbot. But apparently the chatbot started like recommending calorie restriction and all the things that people were like
What?
getting in touch to
Who?
not do. um,
Who?
so
It's like who's checking this
like,
stuff? Like who is
exactly.
regulating
But I
this?
guess,
Like,
that's the thing, isn't it? At the moment, it's being monitored full time. It's, you might as well have people doing it, I guess.
yeah, exactly.
But
Yeah.
some people are obviously sort of saying it's a helpful stopgap or whatever. But certainly, I think, finding a good therapist can take time. It can be expensive. It can take work and so on. But finding one that is contextually right rather than one that is kind of universally sort of just treating everybody. Plus, there are, I think, genuine issues over stuff like confidentiality and so on that I would be slightly
Mm,
concerned about, because presumably the data sets that it's collecting are being used to train it further, which in
yeah.
a sense also creates the Ouroboros like snake eating its tail
Yes.
effect,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that you're just basically getting the same thing back all the time,
Yeah.
because that would be the only way it could manage it. So yeah, but also quite funny, those scenes as well. Especially when Alvy is like, saying how much he hates it and finds it unhelpful, and the machine is like, "Oh, and so I think I should sign you up to an annual plan." And you're like, "Oh yeah, I just remember this is also like a private corporation." Um, yeah. Anything else that we've not talked about? Maybe briefly the
Um,
education thing. That like,
yes,
once you've
yes.
popped your baby out of a pod, you can then basically hand over responsibility of it to
Back to Pegasus.
Pegasus
Yeah.
education thing.
Yep.
Um, I thought that that was in many ways the more horrific part
Yeah,
of the whole kind of
absolutely.
process. Especially the art. Oh, the art was
Oh,
so
yes.
depressing.
It was almost quite confusing. It was like you know, each child had a robotic arm which would
Yeah.
draw the art, and the students would be giving the robot feedback. Um,
Yeah, I got the impression it was like kind of like mentally sort of like feeding back to the sort of like
yeah.
to affect the
This
input
it's
to
a,
the
it's a
like
f-
training the AI with
yeah,
their
they
feedback,
training
as it
the
were.
eye, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Um, yeah. mad. And there was a
Yeah,
really
no.
interesting line about how the Pegasus woman was like, this is what one of people's, deepest misconceptions about AI is that it's not
Yeah.
creative, but in fact, it's like even more creative than we are, or something like that.
Yeah. Oh. And again,
Outrageous.
2023, as this
Yeah.
film is being made, it's before the internet has been taken over by disgusting,
By,
shiny,
yeah.
um, you know, stolen art produced by
Yeah, it's
bots.
really, you'd think stuff from 2 years ago is like kind of becoming outdated, but really, like, I do think that the
It's
pod
just
generation hits a number of 2025 issues on the head, like
this
directly.
is why this is called dystopian fiction has been moved to current affairs because it was dystopian fiction in 2023
Yeah,
and now it is
yeah, it
like
was. Now
normal
it's current
life.
affairs. Yeah, literally.
So yeah, oh, so depressing. What do you think
It
happens at the
is.
end of the film, like beyond the end, as it were? We get some closure when she packages up all the bits of pod and puts them in a box and
Yes,
posts them back.
I guess
Um,
so. It's unclear, but they're like indefinitely remaining on Shell Island with their little
uh,
cabin to, I guess, raise and spend time with their child. But I guess I get there must be consequences somewhere in the
yeah,
writ- small print, as they keep saying in the
yeah.
contract that they signed, that they destroyed the pod.
Mm.
So as you said, it's sort of surprising Pegasus didn't chase them down further. There weren't more consequences um
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
film. But I guess like pod generation part, sort of sequel would be like navigating the education system with their child and
Exactly.
you know
There were some things that it sort of like struck me. First of all, I was quite surprised that it was a little bit like kind of getting into a coconut. It was once they had started the process, relatively easy to extract their baby without the code for
code,
doing so.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so I think that there's a potential security element there that needs to be
Mm.
considered. I also thought there was interesting that like the trigger, I think, for them stealing the egg was that they were going to
It
do the
was
neural
neuro
analysis
enhancement
enhancement.
workshop.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
neuro
Once that's
enhancement workshop.
that, and again, this idea that the moment that fetuses and later babies and children are like completely put into the kind of hands of care of a corporation that's doing further research for its own benefit,
Mm.
then your child is going to be subject to that. But one of the things that surprised me was that didn't come up as a topic was what are they feeding this baby now that it's out of
Yes, yeah,
the
exactly.
because there's no talk about like stimulating lactation, like
Yeah.
some way
And
of getting
like the obviously there's people, who overcome this through using baby formula as well. And
Mm.
there's a whole
Yeah,
crisis with the availability of baby formula
yeah,
to mothers who can't
yeah.
lactate. But the especially breastfeeding in those early stages is like one of the most important times for immunity of a child.
Well, that's the thing I was
Um,
thinking about, given the fact that it
yeah,
hasn't. I mean, I guess they've been like basically pre-birth vaccines or something, because there's obviously
yeah,
no immunity coming from the
the
mother's
mother,
body.
yeah,
And there's, as I say, yeah, there's lots of reasons why you wouldn't breastfeed, but they don't seem to be very prepared, and they
no,
are like. There's a post office a bicycle ride away.
yeah,
But
true.
so I just had some questions there, like in terms of preparedness.
Mm,
Nappies didn't have any of those, I don't think.
no.
I'm not sure they've really thought this through. Um, so there was just a little bit at the end that I felt was that kind of it's quite
A
common
sort of a
in sort of
rush ending,
yeah,
maybe.
but
Yeah,
almost like the once you return to nature, everything will be
I think we'll be
fine.
fine. Yeah.
Uh, you know,
That's all
uh,
that's going back to the LA organic
yeah,
supermarket,
exactly.
sort of,
Yeah, yeah,
avocado and toast and
that's right. Yeah.
your
Yeah.
your guava
Mhm.
berries or
That's
I don't even
right.
know, yeah.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I don't know. And obviously, like, I completely get the sort of potential manipulation of a wellness culture that basically replaces kind of like just doing things that are healthy with, putting a jade egg in your vagina or whatever the sort of obsession was. That was about 2023, I think, wasn't it? Um, and so that sort of like nonsense, getting people to
Mm,
spend money on stuff that is they can gain naturally and so on. But there's probably a sort of extreme like opposite of that, which is the sort of return to the natural world. And then you get stuff like, oh, and don't vaccinate your baby because it's not natural. That's
mm,
sort of the risk of the kind of other extreme. So I'm not saying that they're advocating that or anything at the end of the film, but just I felt a little bit of pragmatism might have been
yes.
called
Yeah. Yeah.
for
Yeah. Yeah.
at the end. But
No, definitely.
I felt that they had taken a journey together that I wasn't sure they were going to make it through to start
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
So,
Definitely.
in
I
that
mean,
sense, it's kind of a nice romantic kind of ending.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, as the I guess AI therapist was right in some senses, your relationship as a I feel as a couple does like probably evolve quite. I mean, as
Mm,
two people who are without
mm,
kidless, so
yeah.
yeah, we wouldn't know, but
Yeah. No,
I can
no.
imagine it does. So I
Mm,
don't know. Anyone out there in a relationship who
sorry.
has children, let us
Yeah,
know
yeah.
how
Um,
if it was a an accurate depiction of your
It does
relationship
come
through
up, doesn't it,
parenthood.
about something like, how already Rachel feels like their entire lives are revolving around the pod and so on.
Yeah,
And, it is obviously true that, especially with a very young child, your entire lives revolve
life
around that
does. Yeah, and
child,
it
and it,
should.
and
Yeah,
and it should,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
it's great to get support and be able to get a break from that. And I know it's really, really hard work. I know, lots of friends and family who've been through it, but at the same time, the idea that I guess of just sort of like ignoring that fact does, I think, mean that the clinic is doing something of a disservice to them by sort of
Mm,
saying, "Oh, we've taken all the hardship out of the process of having children," because actually the doing the work is necessary for the child as well. So, yeah.
yeah.
So, as we conclude this, we for or against pod babies generally.
Um, I feel like for pod babies on a national health service,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
help. Also, I guess we also forgot to mention the options to queer couples who to
That's
same-sex
true.
couples.
Yeah, yeah. And
Um,
I guess single parents as
single
well.
parents as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
You can, I guess, create almost not necessarily a clone of yourself, but you
yeah,
can, but
yeah.
it's stated in the film that men have become redundant for the purpose of procreation. So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
you
They can
know,
use stem cells to
yes,
yeah. The also I think for disabled people as well that
mm,
both, even if you like are able to conceive, the like the challenges of carrying a child with some
mm,
disabilities are enormous, and this would give them equal access,
exactly, exactly.
which I think is
So I think in that sense, and also
mm.
obviously to support premature births,
Yes,
and such and
yeah,
such. But
yeah,
maybe the corporate womb
yeah,
providing sort of artificial womb
yeah.
providers, I might be a little bit against. But
I
yeah,
guess
in
that it comes
general,
back down overall, doesn't it, to the fact
yeah,
that you need to have like to have technological advancement and pharmaceutical advancement and so on, you've got to have funding. A lot of that funding is in private hands.
yes,
So
yes,
we're always taking that balance between like the need for medicines to be created that are simply for the good, even of a tiny
yeah,
group of people, versus the fact that this is not profitable.
yeah.
And
Well, I
so,
guess most importantly to emphasize is like correct and
yeah,
ethical
yeah,
guidance and
yeah,
regulation on such
yeah.
things. So, you
Yeah,
know,
and making sure, I guess, that the law isn't always playing catch up, because I think that's one of
mm,
the risks with all, like, especially
oh
with very
yeah,
fast technological advancement, the law simply isn't in place to fulfill its function
yeah,
until kind of after the fact. So,
yes, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
but a nice little bit of resistance in the face of the corporation
Yeah.
by Rachel and Alvy, even if they did possibly put their unborn child in a certain
Yeah.
amount of danger.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but yeah, which we don't condone. So yeah, okay, cool. Well, I like this film because I think it's more complex and less literal than some. Also, I do think it has some very funny moments in it, and especially in the way in which it satirizes, yeah, certain like characters, I guess,
Yes.
caricatures
Of these
of people,
scenarios,
and
yeah.
yeah, exactly. Um,
It's a lot more if you're looking for a kind of more chill
yeah,
watch
yeah,
out of
yeah,
our
yeah.
current catalogue
Like,
of podcast episodes.
yeah,
I'd
yeah,
recommend Your
yeah,
Generation is a good sort of,
yeah.
you know.
It's true. Nothing truly terrible actually happens to any of the
No,
people on
exactly.
screen.
It's easy going. It's
Yeah,
easy going.
no puppies die, that sort of thing. So yeah, yeah, cool. Okay, well, we're going to come back next episode with Arcadia, which we swapped episodes around. And that's on Channel 4 and it's Belgian, but don't be put off by that. um, Short series, and it's looking at ideas around meritocracy, and I thought it was very good. So please, in the meantime, if you have feedback on today, from people with actual babies and stuff, please do let us know. We'd be interested to hear your views. You can contact us via Instagram, Dystopian Fiction Current Affairs, or Blue Sky, or by emailing us, dystopianfictioncurrentaffairs@gmail.com, or by going to our website and filling out a little form. And that is dystopian fiction has been moved to currentaffairs.com, where you can also buy exciting merch, which is, I am wearing some now. This is not a visual medium, but just appreciate it, imagining it. A nice hoodie that you can wear to support our podcast. And yeah, sign up to our Substack, and that will also keep you informed of not only what is coming up, but what we think about the world at the moment. Mostly
Yeah.
bad. Yeah.
Yeah, mostly not good.
Um, yeah. So, cool. Well, thank you very much, Masha.
Thank you very much, Claire.
Thank you, listeners. Goodbye.